Hi everybody, welcome back to Not Another Tooling podcast, with me, Austin Pearson, and my wonderful co-host Matt Malcolm. I don't know if you're still on the same treadmill walk as our last podcast.
Yeah, I've not got off.
Amazing, very cool shirt today as well. Very, very autumnal. Just, very useful. So today we wanted to talk about cost reduction in the toolchain and monitoring world. Obviously, there's a fair amount of apprehension in the world right now about where the economy is going, and everybody is looking at where can I take money out of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and so it's definitely a topic that customers are asking me about it. So, Matt, first question to you, I guess, is if a customer says to you, "I want to take cost out of my operational tool chain," where would you start?
It's a good question. I'm just going to bounce it back briefly, just so we can get the out in the air, and I'll leave to you to answer. We're talking cost reduction, but what's the difference between cost reduction versus value realization? I don't think there's a fixed answer, but just so we can set the tone.
Yeah, so value realization is something that is atrocious in the toolchain world, I think. Pretty terrible. I don't think I've ever seen a customer get the ROI and the value that they wanted from a tool.
I told you about that in the first episode. If we had a scenario where vendors gave money back guarantees, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yep, absolutely. So I think value realization is getting the most out of your existing investments, versus cost reduction is looking at a bigger picture, I think, of your costs of not just tools but people, and then an exercise on, well, do we have the right tools? Do we have too many people? Could we realize more value out of our existing tools, or do we need to start again? Or what, where could we make inroads? That would be how I would see it. What do you think?
I think that's a good response. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Cool. So I guess, where would we start? And I think it's going to come back to that, I guess, somewhat boring point, but the visibility to begin with. I think doing a cost reduction exercise, that's okay, that's fine. Yes, okay, let's crack on with it. But what are we reducing from? What is the goal? Do we have some big picture? Do we have a metric that needs to move from A to B as an overall cost reduction? But if we do that, is there a level of service that's going to be degraded for it? So I think it's all going to be a starter for 10 on the numbers, understanding on what that big, juicy, meaty goal is on the reduction required. We need to remove X headcount or remove X OPEX cost or whatever it might be. Understanding that, but then so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot or the customer in the foot, is understanding what level of service are they willing to degrade, if possible, might not happen, by making this reduction. So it's understanding those, because ultimately I would expect nearly all of the time there'll be some level of reduction in the service delivered. If there's not, then great, there's some nice holes to be filled there. So it's understanding what the reduction goal is and what level of reduction in service can we get away with. There are the two starting points. And then it's working out the details to marry them. And when we're talking about the details, there's anything spanning from the tech stuff, the processes that might exist, because that could also be considered a reduction. Clearly things like the operational cost, and then associated to that, people headcount, which is traditionally hot on topic when we're looking at reduction.
It is. And that's your second. I'll come back to your first point in a second, because that needs a bit of unpacking, I think. But the second point around what SLAs they're willing to degrade. Yeah. I've had that conversation so many times. They're like, yeah, we want to reduce costs. And okay, which part of the service do you not want delivered quite as well? And they're like, no, that's not how it works. What we will actually want you to do is improve the level of service, but we're giving you 10% less budget to do it with. I think, especially as more and more organizations are going digital and everything's on an app, and we all expect to get an instant response to things and don't want to wait for them 3 hours for them to fix an app so that we can order a cab, right?
Yep.
we want it better. I definitely seeing that's a conversation that, although I always ask the question, people are just not willing to entertain.
I think it's a fair one, isn't it? Because I suppose if you're there from some form of service owner, head of farm, or whatever your role or capacity is, and you've got on your back to do this reduction, but the people who are giving you this steer to make the reduction haven't yet fully understood the impact, then you're in a bit of a sticky spot, because a call's got to be made.
Yeah.
I think the tactful side of things, and the things where the consultants can come in and magic some numbers and whatnot, is all down to making that gap be as close as possible. But it's never going to be perfectly reduced and also perfectly sustained. The odd occasion potentially, but
well, I think it's interesting, because your first point, which is what do you need to move the needle on, I find that almost everybody I talk to, and I was with a CIO last night having this exact discussion, they don't know where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know where you are, then you probably haven't done the work to understand where you could potentially take cost out. Right. So, we're saying the needle is definitely cost, but that cost, most people have hammered every vendor they've got into the floor by now, right? They're not going to get an extra 10% off their costs of their tools, especially as every vendor's costs have gone up, and they're likely to be charging 5-10% more next year anyway. So it's definitely the people angle. Plus, you've got this big, not so much great resignation as people being pulled off to other projects because there's a skills shortage. So actually people are trying to hire people back in to help with their tools and incident management or whatever, and they're having to pay 30% more than they did have. So if they could find better ways to do things with the tools they've got and not have to hire more people, I'm definitely seeing that's an opportunity. And interestingly, Gartner in the last 6 months have come around to that way of thinking, that incident management, the process there that we go through, with our tools of trying to work out what CI it is and what services affected, and gathering the triage data and all of that sort of stuff, that's where the most money is wasted in IT, I reckon, which I would wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah, definitely the inefficiency of process has definitely a hole to be plugged in a lot of organisations. And I think as well, sometimes it's not even a case of the hole to be plugged, it's just that the process is totally defunct in the first place. So if you're looking to make an overall reduction in, maybe that's in operational costs, just fix the process in some cases. You don't even need to touch tech. A lot of the technology, most of the technology in most organisations can do most things very, very well autonomously, fully systemized. But a lot of organisations aren't leveraging that. They're trying to implement processes manually where 6 out of 10 steps don't need to be manual. So the reduction can happen quite easily with effective use of the tools. And that comes up a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think that understanding of where you are today is like gold dust. The easiest way I've ever seen to work that out is just go get an Excel of your last 6 months incident data and do some pivot tables on it. Work out what's your average MTTR across different classes. Do you have are you classifying things right? No, hardly ever. And what are your top 10 incident classes, right? And there'll be stupid things like, I did a project with a customer once where 20% of their incidents were fixed by Windows service restart. However, they'd put half an hour of manual effort into each of those incidents before they got to that stage. And you're like, in this day and age, you can automate that and have it done and sorted, and that's 20% straight away. The way you don't need people to do that, so, and that was just by looking through their incidents. But people naturally, I find, say our problem is X or Y, depending on what has gone wrong in the last month. Everything before that they've forgotten about. They're just like, oh, storage is on fire, mainframe's on fire, whatever it is, and they're like, that's where all our problems are and all our cost is and whatever. And when you look through the incidents, you go, no, it's not. Yeah, you've had 3 major incidents, but yeah.
I think 100% with you, the data doesn't lie. Another phrase of an old US colleague was data is the key. 100%, that's where you need to head in. But you're talking from a bit of a nirvana state. Depending on the level of maturity of the organisation, depends if that data is actually legible in the first place. Because I'm working with various different clients, accounts, customers over whatever period, decade, and a lot of the time the data isn't even in a good enough state for you to make an initial analysis. In actual fact, you're looking at the data, and the first step might be, we need to clean this up. What I've found that helps most effectively, and it is a manual activity to get to this first point, but if you've not got good data you can rely on, is actually walking through the process, that human interaction of going, okay, so what happened? This ticket comes in, show me what you do. I do this, I do this, I do this. You start to map out what somebody actually does in a process. Very quickly you go, you don't need to do that. And why did you do that there? Because you've done that on the first step and it's the same information. That is the most valuable thing that I found, like really, really going back to basics. Show me what you're doing. I was sat down with a service desk analyst not long ago. It's okay, just show me using raise ticket. Call comes in, I'm sitting with him. He's doing some actions, bit of copy paste, doing this and then copy paste. And I just noticed there was multiple parts in the process he was establishing just to create a ticket where it was a copy paste of information on his own notepad. It wasn't taking it from a system. It was taking information from a notepad on his local desktop, pasting it in and then filling in the information. I was thinking, do you do that every time? And it's like, yeah. Only seconds, right? Seconds it was doing it. But every call of this certain type, he'd grab this information, copy paste, fill it in, copy paste, fill it in twice within the same call. It was 2 different sections. And it made us thinking, that's clearly taking an amount of time. So that's the first problem. Second problem is the legibility of that, because now we've got some free text information going in. So we want to get to that step you're talking about where you want to analyze. It's going to be very difficult depending on the products that you've got to analyze free text information. So that reporting capability is diminished. So just watching somebody do their process instantly eradicates items. That particular call, I remember, that was one where it was a system access type request. So somebody calls up, anybody calls up, no verification. Somebody calls up, logs some details down in the same call. So it was the first fix, I guess, technically. They would go into this other system and create the account. My first question was, there was no verification in that process. I'm not saying there should be. That wasn't what I was questioning. It was more around, this call comes in from somebody. You've got this information. You put that straight into this other system, create the account. Why aren't we just doing that automatically? Why aren't we just having this emailed in, handled through exception or however needed, and this account being created? But again, I wouldn't know that from the ticket that was raised. I only would know that from sitting there and observing the process. So data's great if you can trust it, but physically being there with somebody for the process, invaluable.
Yeah, no, I always do that as well. And interestingly, when you get the teams together and you can get 15, 20 people in a room, and then they all kind of see what everybody else is doing, and they often are in different offices or they don't talk to each other or whatever. And then somebody's like, oh, right, so you can't do your job if I don't fill this bit of the process in, and that's why we need that. Oh, and you do that thing. That's really cool. If I did that as well, that would save me loads of time and effort. So getting people in to map through that process, really, really good idea. And it becomes really obvious then where you can make some pretty simple cost savings, I think.
Yeah, honestly, literally that process, that activity took place last week. So I was just trying to generally understand how the product set was being used, just to just to see if we could help from a tooling perspective, nothing complex. And I had a process, well-documented process, I must add. I was happy with the documentation, good. Then we had everybody in the room that was most likely people that were using it. They meted you on a regular enough basis, that wasn't the question. But presented with the process, there was questions as we ran through the process, like, oh, do we do that? Has that happened? What about this? We don't do that anymore. And then when we physically went to go and do that in the product set, it definitely wasn't the process. So for that particular scenario, we're now going to revisit that as the group with the tooling team involved as well to map out the correct, and not to say it's a right or wrong process, but the actual process that is being done and can be done. And then we're going to do further deep dive with vendor input to see if there's any features, functions, benefits of the specific products that we're using, to see if there's any extra enhancements. So ultimately that will do a form of reduction. And the main thing for that process, which made it a bit more complex, some of the users of that process weren't IT users. So they were doing an IT logging type activity, but they weren't IT users. So we needed to simplify it, or it needs to be simplified to make it super easy for them. But without us going through that process in the first place, which we thought was well documented, it's only 3 months old documented, it wasn't reflecting the true story. But yes, data, great. Get hands-on understanding, even better. And it's a combination of the two, right? I suppose if you was there looking to go after the hard hitters, you're only here for 2 months, 3 months, reduce our footprint, our bill, our time, our staff, or whatever else. First thing you are going to ask for is data. Very quickly, you're going to be able to see how legible it is, but nothing can replace that. Getting hands-on.
No, I agree with you. So I want to change tack a little bit in another cost reduction play that I see that people still aren't doing very well, which is tool consolidation / replacement. And I think this is an inherent problem for the last 20 or 30 years of people buying tools, is they've just bought stuff to solve a problem, then they go and buy another thing to solve another problem and another thing to solve another problem, and they never come back and looked at what they're trying to achieve and whether they've got the right tools. And so you end up with, particularly in larger organizations, whole rafts of people whose job is to make sure that all of these tools can talk to each other, and whole massive upgrade programs so they can all talk. And you're like, you're trying to reduce your MTTR and the cost associated with the people fixing problems, and you're never going to get there with this myriad of tools that you've got that you're trying to integrate and upgrade and whatever, unless you've got completely bottomless pockets. But also the same does apply down on the lower end of the spectrum. Like if you bought a network management tool and that was 3-5 years ago, what do you need now that's going to help meet those goals that we talked about? And actually, are there better tools out there that do a load of other stuff that could potentially be cheaper? And one example I always give to people is, like, almost every place I walk into, they've got a discovery tool or more, a network tool, a server tool, a cloud tool, an event management tool, a separate automation tool. And all of a sudden you're like, hang on a minute, you've got 6 tools. If you want to start taking some cost out, do you really need 6 tools? Could you consolidate into a couple, especially as some of these people don't look at the overall total cost of ownership? They look at, what does the licensing cost look like? Mm-hmm. And you look at some of the bigger tools, right? They require an Oracle database or SQL or DB2 or something like that. And some of them need big Unix servers on the back of it. And suddenly your tool costs are so huge when you look at the TCO that swapping to a modern day SaaS platform would straight away take 50% out of what you're doing. I rambled there, got excited about that. Sorry.
So I think one thing I want to come back to, but not yet, is vendors expanding to an nth degree and the notion of vendor lock-in. I'll come back to that though. So it all comes down to the more boring stuff again, is the documentation position. So if you're trying to understand what tools can do what, you need to know what capabilities you need to deliver as a business. Now, in some cases, that could be a tool and architect type person, or an enterprise architect, or a CTO, or whatever else. But there should be at least a baseline of capabilities that the organisation needs to deliver in the first instance. Whether or not they split those out via technical, functional, non-functional, or business, doesn't matter so much, as long as it's common with the business that you're working within. And then, of course, depending on the capacity of the person coming in to do the exercise, that capability model might expand a little bit. What about this? Oh, we don't do that. Oh, would we call it this instead, or whatever else? But starting with the capability landscape requirements, what do you need to achieve? I need to move that needle. I need to close that door. I need to shut this switch, whatever else. Then looking inwards to see, okay, what do we have available within the estate? And this is stuff within the estate that is sometimes installed, deployed, utilized, and sometimes as well licensed but not deployed, installed, or utilized. So, you know, you're looking at your software license procurement model, and entitlement will give you those answers. Really good source of information. But ultimately, you're looking for show me what we've got in the bag. Everything we've got in the bag here, matching it up then to the individual capabilities. Now, as you go through, you need to have some competence with those individual tools you're starting to look at now, because you need to be able to look at them and adequately align them to one, two, several capabilities. So you're going through the bag or the list, whatever else, and you're making sure that this product here, it can do this, 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 this. It doesn't matter if it does, but we want to know at the same time, does it not? All we're trying to do is work out the overarching current capability model with all of the products that can fulfill it. That's a starting position for you then to work backwards from, because then you can work out, well, this is a decent product set, and with this new feature, we can do this. Actually, that one can overlap onto these. And all you're really generating at this point is a big dirty spreadsheet with a matrix style approach, product capability. And wherever at the moment, very crude approach, you see more crosses under certain tools than others, that's where you can start to consider de-scoping some of those product sets. Now, the caveat there would be you do need competence in those individual tools, or you might miss something, or it might be such an old version of the product that you haven't looked at the new one, which is actually ticking a few more requirements. So you need to go through a bit of a competency exercise in each of those product stacks to understand this is what I think it can do. However, with version 2.0, it can do this, and it can do this, and it can do this. So your spreadsheet with your matrix changes based upon you potentially taking a step forwards and bolting on the new service or expanding the product line or whatever else. So that needs to be done before you consider anything new. When you get to the end of that exercise, where I'd traditionally be looking is all about the numbers at this point, is what's those operational costs for these things? The bit you mentioned there, not just the license, but the people to support it, the back-end software to support it, the other product that has to watch it, all that kind of stuff. Then you've got some cost. You've got your overall capability model, and in there you might see some gaps, which is a good thing. You're seeing what products you got which fulfill those capabilities, and you're seeing the costs of that. Then you can start looking at the market proposition. Then you can start looking at, okay, well, this is what it currently looks like. We could swap and change here, and we could do this here. But actually, this market offering has 6 out of 10 of these capabilities, and the operational cost rounds out to be 2/3 cheaper, or whatever it might be. But it's a very diligent stage approach. It all starts with creating that visibility, a capability model specific to the business, and then if there's any nuances to bring in from a maturity point of view, bring it in. We'd be very focused, because then what you're doing, you're not trying to bring in a new product because it's new and it's ticks all these boxes that you don't know what the boxes are. It's very purposeful and very diligent, because you know what you could take away to replace it, but you're meeting the requirements. Now, the extra bit on that, which we've talked about in one of the earlier podcasts, is the fluffy word, the value proposition. You shouldn't need to worry so much at this point what the value proposition is, because you as a business should understand, business owners, CTOs, etc., should understand what this capability delivers to the business. I need this capability to deliver this to the business. From a technologist point of view, it doesn't really matter what you throw at it. There's going to be nuances there, but ultimately that value and that metric side of things, if you deal with that at the capability level, it makes the rest of it a pretty much agnostic exercise, cleaner, versus going through those falsified value exercises with various vendors.
I think that is a very good summary, and a good way to end discussion today. I'm sure there's plenty we'll unpack of that in future episodes, but just to recap, we were talking about cost reduction today. We talked about cost reduction versus value realization, and we said you really need to identify what does an organization need to move the needle on, and to do that you really need to map out your processes and see what's going on day to day, because that will probably give you some immediate answers, and then go through your incident data as well to see what leaps out, and ask the question to the business: if they're expecting you to spend less money, are there any SLAs they are willing to degrade? Then we talked about tool consolidation / replacement, and we said you need to understand what's the baseline capability that you need as a business, what's in your estate today, and how does that map with on your matrix of your baseline capability that you need to deliver to the business. Where are your competencies? What are your operational costs of those tools today? And then you can go and look at the market and see if there's potential for tool cost reduction and improvement. Is that a fair summary?
No, well, there's so much there. I kind of wish I didn't ramble on so much about tools consolidation piece, because that would be a decent meaty episode in itself, because there's so many facets to it. But yes, great summary.
Well, I think that would be maybe we can do a deep dive with one of our guests in future episode on that, because it's going to be even hotter, I think, over the next year or two, with economic pressures. So people will want to unpack that more. So wonderful. Thank you very much. Matt, I'll see you still on your treadmill in a couple of weeks for the next episode.
Sounds good.
It's really useful. Cheers.
See you guys.